What's up, everyone? Andrew from Nine Leaders, and today I'm very excited for other guest that is joining me on the podcast. You may have known him from a previous video. I've actually reviewed one of his books, The Joshua Principle, Leadership Secrets of Selling. He is a world-renowned speaker when it comes to business sales. He is the current co-founder and sales innovation director for Sales IQ Global. He has lectured at university, he is an author, and he is the most read contributor on LinkedIn when it comes to business sales. So somebody that is absolutely phenomenal in terms of his sales skills. And having had training with him, I know that what he talks about is the real deal. And I've implemented a lot of what his frameworks espouse. So if this is the first time to the channel, welcome. It's great to have you. Nine Leaders is all about equipping new and experienced leaders with the skills required to take on 2021 and beyond. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and smash the subscribe button down below. If you'd like to learn anything more around Tony J. Hughes, all the links are in the description below. You can click on there, as well as obviously you can join our Nine Leaders community. So this is Tony J. Hughes. Enjoy. Tony Hughes, welcome to Nine Leaders. It is absolutely fantastic to have you. Are you keeping well?
I am, Andrew. I've been so excited about this conversation. It's been, I guess, about 15, 18 months since we last saw each other in Joburg.
Absolutely. You came through to South Africa for training for our senior leadership team and our sales team at Flight Centre Travel Group. And I must admit, it's probably one of the best training, not only from a sales perspective, but also just in terms of leadership and specifically leadership in sales. So you really made a huge impact on us as a group. So it was great to meet you, obviously, and sit under your tutorship for that period. For those of you, I've also obviously reviewed your Joshua Principle book. We're also looking at doing combo prospecting a little bit later, but obviously world-renowned author, expert on B2B sales. So it's really, really great to have you. And there's a lot I wanted to jump into today with regards to how the last 12 months have been, what you see for the future, particularly what trends you're seeing, and specifically around a very exciting project that you've just launched now with a third book coming out. So I'm excited to jump into that. But before we get into all of that, how have the last 12 months treated you? Obviously, COVID top of mind. It's everything that's happened in the last 12 months. How's things been going for you?
Well, I'd always said to my friends that if I never see the inside of an aeroplane again, it'll be a day too soon.
Yeah.
And going to Joburg was the last trip I've done. I've actually loved dialing back all the travel. And as much as you're saying I had an impact on the team there, that team had a huge impact on me. I just think South Africa is such a beautiful country with such amazing potential. Yeah, I was blown away with South Africa. But I really think the last 18 months have been a catalyst period for driving amazing levels of change. We all know that we're living in the fourth industrial revolution. We're now beyond farming and agriculture, and then heavy manufacturing and industries. Beyond those two industries all being disrupted, we now know that white collar professions, people that work in offices, are all being impacted hugely. And the thing for all of us watching this, if you're selling to larger businesses or if you're more in the small to medium business and mid-market arena, the truth is, for all business leaders throughout last year and now into 2021, well into 2021, all leaders are thinking, do you know what? This is a once in a generation opportunity for us to drive change in our business that we previously never even thought might be possible. Yeah. We can concurrently drive cost out of doing business while at the same time giving our staff and our customers a much better experience. And if you're wondering about what the future holds, it's definitely filled with technology. You don't need to be Nostradamus to figure that out. But the scary thing is, if you're a business person watching this, you've got competitors that you've never heard of that are going to come along that are thinking about how to disrupt you. Those high value services and solutions you provide are drifting toward commoditization. And it's very tempting for a lot of us to think that the relationships we have with our customers or our partners are enough to protect us,
Mm.
but they're just not. There's a software engineer right now for all of us that's well funded with venture capital thinking, how do we make this role go away and just automate it? So there's a lot we need to think about.
Absolutely. And obviously, when moment you bring in a technology, people get incredibly scared. Is my job at risk? How do I adapt? And I think that's one of the biggest things of this 12 months is that ability to be agile and adapt. And that's going to continue into the future. It's roles that were around 10, 15, 20 years ago. They're no longer around now. And the roles that are around now, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. So as an individual, how do I equip myself to really be as agile and adaptable as possible? I've got a couple questions from my network that came through. Obviously, I was very excited to have you on, so I put it out, my feelers out for questions. And for those of the guys that weren't on the training itself, obviously, I know your background, how you got into sales, but for those that don't necessarily know you all that well, can you tell us a little bit? Let's take you back all the way as a youngster. How did you get into sales? And then secondly, why the hell are you still in sales after 30, 35 years? What has kept you in that sales environment?
Before I talk about my journey, I'll answer the last part first.
Yeah.
I think that selling is all about making a positive difference in the lives of others, making a difference for those people individually in their personal life, as well as professionally for them in their role in the business or the organization they work for.
Yeah.
So I think selling can be very altruistic, and it's the success of sellers that really funds everything else that goes on in business. When I was in my very early 20s, I went to work for my father. I was in the bank initially when I went into the workforce, and I left the bank and went and worked for my dad. He was a Mensa level genius, massive IQ.
Okay.
He was an inventor. He was a hydraulic engineer, a metallurgist, a tool maker, amazing guy. And when I went to work for him, I thought, wow, success in business is all about having an amazing product. And then if you can market that product well, you'll be okay.
Mm.
But what I did is we ended up selling our manufacturing business in Australia, and I took it all to America. We figured America was where the big market was. And what I learned in America was that if you can't personally sell, you're really nowhere. So selling is actually really important. And we've only got to look back in history. For those that are of dinosaur age and old enough to remember, we think of beta versus VHS, those two recording formats for videotape.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the best technology lost. The best technology lost. The worst technology won because they sold it better, they marketed it better. Even if you look at computer operating systems, there was Bill Gates and Microsoft with DOS, and then there was Unix and basically the Mac operating system. Unix operating systems are massively better than Windows. Windows is a nightmare, but Bill Gates had the right strategy. They gave the OS away for free. They got lots of people developing on it. So the best sales and marketing strategy will win the day as opposed to best product. So then when I came back to Australia, we were getting royalties for 12 years from selling the company. And I thought, and I came back because of personal tragedy in my family. My mum got cancer and died, and a whole lot of personal issues. And I needed to stay here rather than go back to the States. And what I decided is, look, no matter what I want to do in the future, I need to learn how to sell. And we had a non-compete for 12 years with the company we'd sold because we're getting royalties.
Yeah.
And I got a job in sales, and I just loved it. I thought, wow, you can make amazing levels of income and have a great lifestyle and actually make a difference for people. But you need to be incredibly resilient. And we've always known in selling, you need reasonable IQ. You can't be dumb in anything in life and be successful. You need very high EQ in selling. You need to understand yourself and how to read others and have empathy and rapport and read a room and manage politics well. But there's a new Q that everybody needs, and it's TQ. It's technical quotient. Increasingly today, we need to know how to augment our efforts by using technology really well. And you mentioned earlier about people being fearful of technology. I just encourage everybody that's listening to this or watching this, when you think about, could a bot replace me in what I do, or could a bot replace my very business? Don't think about your role being automated away by tech. Think about the aspects of that role that could be. What are the tasks within the role that could be done better with technology? And then how do you blend the best of human with the best of technology to be far more effective than competition?
Yeah. So, and again, I think when you start talking about tech in sales, and we'll dive into it quite a bit more. Obviously, we look at your new book, but it's necessarily not necessarily about the what we do. It's more or less the how we do it. So, how do you go about gaining data? How do you keep data on your clients? How do you research all of that automated? How do you combine the different technologies that you've got? You speak in combo prospecting around your telephone, your social media, your email, all of the power of those different tools. And literally technology is just adding a layer of different tools to your basket to be able to use effectively. You spoke right in the beginning as to why you got into sales around that altruistic perspective of that really adding value and helping people. Do you think that we are moving into a new, obviously we have already, but there's still a perception for buyers around that salesman bash down the door, the Kirby vacuum cleaner salesman, that I'm just going to be bashing on this door until you actually buy my product. That altruistic side of things, do you think the buyers are changing that? Our buyers are a lot more knowledgeable around their environments. They're a lot more knowledgeable about what is out there. There's a lot more information. So is that bash down the door, vacuum cleaner salesman really relevant in this new world?
Well, we need to find a way to break into the world of the people we're seeking to help, but we need to do it with context and relevance. And I believe that the future of selling is when buyer sentiment meets seller relevance in a way that's really been initially detected and then empowered by technology. So that for the sellers, the technology melts away, but it's helping them find people that have highest propensity to buy. So for example, the sport I do with my family is wakeboarding. So,
Yep.
so we bought a bigger boat that did wakeboarding a few years ago. And the result of that was we needed to buy a car that could tow a bigger boat.
Yeah.
Now, the really interesting thing is that when I talked to the dealer that sells these wakeboard boats, it's a brand called Malibu. They're the #1 brand in the world. There's only one distributor of that product in the state or province that I live in. So they've got this exclusive distributorship for this #1 product. I said to them, has any four-wheel drive seller or manufacturer approached you for some kind of symbiotic relationship, right? So because if people are buying a bigger boat, they're going to need a bigger car.
Yeah.
You know, if you could let us know who they were, now we've got some strong context and we're very relevant to them. And he said, no, not one person. Not one company had tried to organize that kind of relationship.
That's interesting.
And yet there's a lot of synergy there. When I did a Google search, I didn't search for car brands. I searched 3,500 kilo towing capacity, and almost nothing came back from the car manufacturers about that. So for all of us in selling, we need to create content that attracts people to us. We need to monitor for the trigger events that go on that create a high level of relevance for us in the mind of the buyer, like that situation of buying a bigger caravan or a bigger boat that necessitates the need for the bigger car. So we know in business to business selling that senior people moving into a new role have typically been hired to affect change.
Yep.
If we can help people in that role, then that's a trigger event that should be prompting us to contact them. So the thing is, rather than being people that are annoying interrupters of their day without any relevance, we need to be people, wow, it's almost like a mind reader. Yeah, I have been thinking about this. I'm really glad you called.
Yeah.
And we can use technology to help us do that well.
Absolutely. And I think to that exact example, I literally had a similar experience last week, looking at potentially upgrading my car, took it around to a couple dealers, and literally the only two questions each dealer asked me was, what is my budget and what model am I looking for? And I had absolutely no answer, because all I really wanted was to get a trade-in value on my current model. And they did absolutely nothing more around that qualifying me as a buyer. And
yeah.
Absolutely. And they just literally went into going, okay, well, you're not quite sure. Well, this is what we've got. And not one of the models on the floor that they actually showed me was relevant to my context. And wow. They all said, great, fantastic. They did a little bit of a diagnostic on the car. They said they'd get back to me a little bit later that day with a trade-in value. And only one out of the four actually came back to me eventually. And it was literally, again, just pumping that product of theirs, and none of it was relevant to anything of my context. So again, the question is that amount of value that you create as a seller for your client, understanding the context, and obviously then inputting that for the altruistic side of things, for the betterment of both you as the buyer and as for the seller, that they're both getting value out of the contract, if you want to put it that way.
Yes.
You spoke around, obviously, with both the Joshua principle and combo prospecting around enterprise selling. And one of the questions I had from one of our viewers was that a lot of that is on a large market, complex selling. But with the tools and frameworks that you've put it together with regards to RSVP selling, combo prospecting, how much of those can we actually extrapolate and put into the SME market? South Africa's got quite an impactful SME market here in South Africa. Obviously, from a data perspective, it ranges anything from 20% of GDP up to about 42% of GDP, whether it's informal or formal trading. So there is quite a large percentage of our GDP that falls into that SME space. How much of those frameworks that you've put together can be overlaid into the SME and is applicable to SME selling?
Yeah, the things that are really relevant are conversation narrative. We need to build conversations with our potential clients and even our existing customers that are all about them rather than about us. Most sellers tend to lead with, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is how it works. And then we hope that the buyer is going to join the dots.
Yeah.
So the first thing is whether you're selling into big enterprise, corporates, government, or whether you're selling it more into the mid-market or small to medium business, small to medium enterprise market, we need to nail our narrative. How do we think that we could help this person in their role drive better results, both for them as an individual and for their business? So that's relevant at all levels.
Yeah.
The next thing is, in big enterprise selling, a big part of the process is to help the person we're mainly selling to achieve consensus and support of their broader team. Okay. And even in a smaller business, even if it's just sort of the boss that appears to make the decision, there'll be others in their team that they'll want to have on board. I remember a salesperson told me just about 2 months ago, a very sad story, where they ran this big, long sales process and they thought they'd got everybody on board. So they got the CEO on board, the CFO on board, the IT manager on board. And they said, yes, we'll do this. But then what happened was a nasty surprise at the last minute. A person, a junior manager in the finance team said, hey, look, this all sounds great. And I can see that we need to do it, but not right now. I don't have the bandwidth in my small team to be able to implement my piece of this. So the whole thing got delayed. So this is an example of we need to help the person we're selling to gather consensus in their own organization. Because we need to not just focus on the person that can say yes, but the others that we think could say no.
Yeah. And I suppose also from a process perspective, obviously RSVP, you talk about that relationship, the strategy, the value, and the process. In an SME space, even though there are, like you said, only maybe 2 or 3 decision makers, there's a lot of processes behind the scenes. And specifically when you start talking technology and the rise of the CIO, they've run on a strategic basis, but a lot of the detail is done by the junior teams or the middle management side of things. So understanding that their internal processes and what their capabilities are, it's all well and good to go and implement something, but it's often the uptake that's where projects and new technology or new ideas potentially fall flat. From a leadership side of things, and one thing I really value about you is that regardless of your position, the companies that you've run, the senior leadership positions that you've always had, you've never lost that sales mentality, and you always view as a leader, you are selling. And it's a conversation I had last week with one of my clients, saying that leadership and sales, there is so much crossover in terms of the skill set that you need to have. Leaders sell in terms of their vision, a new project, their understanding. And in the sales side of things, there is elements of leadership that sits in with a salesman. What's your opinion on that collaboration between leadership and sales? And also that as a leader, just because I've got a title, CFO, CEO, that I stop selling. What's your take on that?
Well, Andrew, I agree. So politics is leadership in a social construct, and selling is leadership in a commercial construct.
Mm,
Because at the end of the day, selling is about persuasion. Even if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at
yeah.
the end of the day, people want to self-actualize and feel like they're making a difference. And selling is about making a positive difference in the life of our customer. But it all really begins in us having a level of authentic belief in what it is that we offer and the change we think we can affect. But then we want to almost evangelize. We want to help set a vision for a brighter future with our potential customer or existing client.
Mm,
But then what we need to do, this is where so many sellers fall down, right? So we need to sell to the heart and vision for a brighter future, but then we need to immediately underpin that conversation with the business case that funds the change.
mm,
Because where so many leaders fall down is they'll try to persuade, they'll talk about a better way of doing something, but the commercial value is not strong enough. The size of the purchase order for us as the seller or the supplier directly relates to the size of the problem that we're solving. So there's actually three reasons that deals stall and often just die. And the first of the three reasons is that there's just not enough commercial value in change. The business case is not strong enough. It was interesting. There was some ROI. People wanted to talk about it, but then they go, do you know what? With all of the other priorities that we've got, with the limited resources of bandwidth we have internally, this sounded okay. It's probably a good idea. We'll keep it on the radar, but there's no urgency.
yeah.
And in the absence of a compelling event, which is actually very rare in a selling situation, what we need is a compelling business case, compelling commercial value. So the first reason deals stall or die is lack of commercial value. Anchor the business case. The next reason that deals will tend to stall or die is a lack of consensus. We just talked about that a little while ago.
Yeah.
They need everybody on board, even if they're a head kicker, type A personality boss. They're all smart enough. Everyone's smart enough today to know we need to bring people on the journey. So consensus, get everybody on board. And then the third reason deals stall or die is just some kind of nasty surprise. The
Mm,
person we're dealing with leaves, there's a big health issue, there's a big downturn in the economy, a competitor does something dramatic, um, they get acquired, mergers and acquisitions.
yeah.
And although we can't directly influence those things, what we can do is maintain a sense of urgency, because as more time transpires, the higher the probability for some nasty surprise popping up.
Makes sense. Makes sense. You mentioned obviously in with circumstances like that changed dramatically. Last 12 months we've seen that massive amounts of change, massive amounts of disruption. Um, I, I, I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from the horse's mouth. The importance of sales in this period. A lot of companies have gone into that survival mode. Let's cut expenses. Let's bring it down as much as possible. Potentially drive new levels of revenue or channels of revenue. And very often the things that get cut in budget is people development, marketing, and then potentially, obviously, the hardware, the buildings that you might be in, especially now with the technology that's risen. Where do you see the place of sales going into the future? How important is it?
Sales is everything. I used to be a pilot, and I often make the analogy when I'm keynoting, if I use flying metaphors, that sales is really the engines. It's creating the airspeed over the wings that gives you the lift. For anybody who has flown, we all know that if you don't have airspeed over all of those surfaces, the controls don't do anything.
Yeah.
So you can pull back, but nothing's going to happen. So now, obviously, we don't want to sell in a way that creates a lot of downstream problems, and we don't want to end up with customer churn where people are leaving us.
Yeah.
So we need to sell in a way that's ethical, that's authentic, and where clients stick. But selling is absolutely everything. It's the most important thing. Any buffoon leader in business can cost cut, but cost cutting is a tactic. It's not a strategy. If you want to succeed based on having the lowest overhead and being the cheapest, that can work, but it's a very low probability of success, and there's only room for one of those.
Yeah.
What we want to do is we want to be the best at providing unique value. We want to be the best at mitigating risk for people as they drive change. So you can cost cut as cost cut as a tactic, but at the end of the day, we've got to work out how do we engineer value for our customers and how do we go and acquire customers, because that's the number one key metric of a healthy business, the rate at which it can acquire and successfully onboard and retain brand new logo customers.
Awesome. So you've mentioned wakeboarding now. You mentioned flying. The last question I've got from my network, being a South African network, obviously, is a cricket or rugby?
I
Or
actually
neither?
like both.
Okay.
I've become a big fan of 2020.
Yeah.
I've lost interest in rugby because Australia is hopeless. Rugby is administered incredibly badly in this country.
Look,
Um,
it's not unusual, to be honest.
I've lost respect for the innovation. I'm actually a big fan of the All Blacks, are the team I just respect the most, followed by the Springboks.
Well, good answer. Good answer. You almost lost it and lost us there, but well done. So, Tony, I want to spend some time, and we've weaved it in and out around technology, and I think it's very exciting as to that you are bringing out your third book called Tech Powered Sales. So, obviously, can you take us through just what was the impetus for this, for the writing the new book? And it is a collaboration between yourself and another author. What's been the real driving force behind this, and to get this book written?
Yes, so I've co-authored with Justin Michael, who's an amazing gentleman out of the USA.
Mm.
But the catalyst for doing this book is everyone knows the future's filled with technology. Everyone's got all of this tech already that they're grappling with, trying to work out how they can be productive. And most people are just doing a really, really poor job. And I believe that in this decade, in the 2020s, 1/3 of field selling roles are going to disappear. And let me just give you an example of this. I was speaking to 18 CEOs 2 weeks ago here in Sydney. And at the morning tea break, one of them came to me and said, "Hey, look, I agree with what you're saying." He said, "Let me tell you the story of our own company." Now, I won't say the name of the company because it's sort of confidential information, but here's the interesting thing. This company provides a lot of raw supplies for pharmacists, the chemist, drugstore, pharmacy people that make ointments, medicines, drugs. They actually make them up rather than the off-the-shelf ones from the big pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
In America, they were looking at their CRM and they discovered that the 2 highest performing territories in North America had no rep in the territories for 4 months, and that those territories weren't only performing strong with sales, they had dramatically improved their margins since they had no rep. And they thought, what in the world is going on here? We are convinced that we have to have reps in the field visiting pharmacy, chemist shops, we call them in this market, or drugstores in America. We have to have reps calling on these people every 2 weeks to make sure that we're front of mind, to make sure that we're the ones, that they're spending the money with. Relationships are everything. Our reps keep telling us relationships are everything for us. So they went and interviewed their customers in this market. They found out some really interesting things. First thing is, almost all of their customers universally said, when your reps come into my premises, 95% of the time they take me away from serving customers. That doesn't help my business at all. Next thing is, the information they want to share with me is something that you could have emailed or snail mailed to me. They're sharing information. You can still invite me to your golf day. You can still give me, your latest data sheet. I don't need a person to turn up and hand deliver it for me.
Yeah.
I said, well, where is the value? Surely there's value in them coming and seeing you. And they said, well, actually, yes. I can always get a discount out of them, if I'm thinking of placing an order. So they help me get a better deal.
Hence the margin.
And this company's going, what? You got to be kidding me. The only value they provide is that they destroy our margins, as the supplier. So here's what they did, bold experiment. They said, let's pick a market that's representative of the USA, but not so big that will do epic damage to our business if we get this wrong. So they picked Australia. They could have easily picked South Africa, right? But they picked Australia. they had 3 reps in Australia in their business, and they fired them. They left the business. And ever since they've done that, revenues continue to grow strongly, but margins are much stronger. And what they've done is they've diverted that money to their tech stack in the business and to good content writing that provides value for their audience, their customers. And they've invested in training their technical support people that get the phone calls from the pharmacists about product to have better people skills and have more insights and to be more commercially aware to help make good recommendations for them that result in revenue for the company, but in the interest of their clients. And they found that's made a huge difference to their business. So the thing is, tech is changing everything. There's going to be a move to inside sales. But here's the reality. If what you sell as you listen to this or watch this, if what you sell at the end of the day is a commodity in the eyes of your buyer, the way you need to differentiate is in the experience that you provide people and how they interact. And that needs to be now in a digital first world. So what COVID's done is accelerated the fourth industrial revolution, where everyone's thinking digital first rather than seeing a person physically first. It's all digital first. So how do you create awesome customer experience through all of the channels, this thing called omni-channel, whether it's social, whether it's website, whether it's an app, whether it's text messages, whether it's your call center, whether it's walking in your premises, whether it's a rep in the field. So people invest money in great customer experience, and they'll inject high value people from their organizations with the buyer at exactly the right time.
Okay. And you speak about that content level, and you put an article, I think it was last week or late last week or early last week, just with regards to the importance of that content and creating context also for your buyers. Instead of having that person cold calling or out on the road in the field, it's really around creating value digitally around the content that you create. If you had to put it into a commodity sort of context where I am selling a commoditized product, how do I align that content, or just give me some insight as to the shifting to that digital content to create value? Because again, you said right in the beginning that your perception was around it's a great product. And then we also said that, well, not always the best product wins, it's how it's marketed. So that content side of things is going to become incredibly important. How do you see that falling into that commoditized space?
So Andrew, I'll provide 2 examples. We talked about the example of buying a car, which I think everybody could relate to.
Yeah.
If a manufacturer provided a lot of content about how to calculate tow capacity or downforce on the drawbar when you're towing, or whether a petrol versus a diesel engine is really the right one for you to be using based on the type of towing that you're doing with the boat. All of these kinds of questions, do you need sway bars if you're towing a boat at high speed? Whatever these things are, that really start to educate the buyer before they're getting into your specific product. That's how you start to attract people. That's how you become the emotional favorite. I'll give you another example. I've got a swimming pool at my place. A lot of people do in South Africa as well. But if I look at pool chemicals, you can't get anything that's more than a commodity than that. Just chlorine, things that get rid of calcium in a pool or whatever. They're just commodity chemicals. But the local pool shop that I go to gives me a great experience. They track my water hardness and how it's all trending. I've got a problem with calcium growing in my pool. I've had a lot of frustration trying to figure out why and getting a lot of bad advice, but they've solved that problem for me. So I'm getting trusted advice about the levels of those commodity products and how and when to apply them to solve my problem. So the product is a commodity, but the advice they're providing me is not. And therefore I go do business with them, and it's not about price anymore. That's the way we move away from price to value. Is we're the ones that provide the insights, and we help people get greater efficacy or a better return on the thing that they're buying if they work with us. We provide value outside of the core product itself.
So it's not necessarily about the product. The product needs to be functional and solve a problem, but it's to attract and to really create as much value. It's around that advice, that trust that individuals create and businesses create with their end user. from a B2B side of things, now you're obviously selling on that B2B aspect, but the end user is that customer. So it's almost that B2B2C
Yes.
sort of framework. How important is that understanding that end user need versus the enterprise need, if I can put it in that context?
Yeah, Andrew, I love that you raised that, because that's how we all need to think. We need to move from thinking about how do I sell my thing to my customer to instead thinking, how does my customer create value for their customers in working with me? Right. So rather than how do I sell my thing, how does my customer improve their margins? How do they grow market share? How does the relationship I can provide help them achieve the things that they're wanting to do? And that's absolutely key, because at the heart of selling is also conveying the right intent. I talked about making a positive difference. We want to convey that intent, but we want to convey the intent. Hey, I'm all about you improving the way you're running your business. I'm not sure whether we'd be the best fit for you or not. That's why I need to ask you some questions. And then the person will happily answer the questions, as opposed to us turning up saying, oh, let me ask you some questions. And then the buyer feels like they're being qualified by a seller.
Yeah.
Nobody likes being qualified by a seller, but they're happy to explore whether this is a good fit.
Absolutely. And coming back to that tech side of things, where do you see the biggest, and this is actually a question coming from Hannah Clinton in the UK, which you also know very, very well.
I love Hannah.
Absolutely. What do you see is the next level of technology? Is technology necessarily, like you said, replacing the field salesperson, or is it around the data collection, and how do you actually make good qualified business decisions around the data that you use and analytics? Where do you see the technology going in the next 2-3 years?
Well, if we look at how powerful technology is, it was in 1997 that IBM Big Blue beat Garry Kasparov in chess.
Yeah.
And that was really just brute strength, what if analysis. It wasn't really true AI. But then in 2011, IBM Watson won Jeopardy, the game Jeopardy, with a talking computer. Watson at the time was the size of a big bedroom. Now Watson is the size of a pizza box, if you can believe this, with how technology keeps improving. But Watson's dealing with obscure natural language, abstract contextualization. The game Jeopardy is really tough. And there's no Jeopardy champion on the face of the planet that can beat Watson. So it can do that. If you look in 2016, Google's AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol, who was the 18 times world champion at Go. Now, Go is the oldest game on the planet. It's 2,500 years old. There's more options in the game of Go on the board, more options in a game than there are atoms in the universe.
Holy crap.
Can you believe this? More than atoms in the universe. And back in 2016, AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol 4-1. He only won one game. But in the process, AlphaGo taught itself. It did this thing called move 37. There's only a 1 in 10,000 chance that any human would have made that move. So AI is now getting to the point, we're moving from narrow AI in the next 20 years to general AI, where it can self-learn. Last amazing fun fact, in 2018, Google Duplex rang, and it's all online if you want to look at it, but it rang businesses booking appointments, and the people on the other end of the phone had no idea they were dealing with it. They just thought it was a human. So tech can do a lot of things. It can watch and listen and read and record data at a far greater rate than people. We've seen how accounts payable automation we've replaced accounts payable people with accounts payable technology and workflows. And it can capture and assess and categorize that information so powerfully. But here's the amazing thing. It can instantly recall huge amounts of data much faster than any human could do. So again, if you look at sites like Amazon, if you're looking for music or books, this is why those businesses have all disappeared. You can manage that better, and tech can multitask much better than humans can. So where there's big data, we're monitoring for trigger events, we're doing what if analysis, we're doing pattern matching. In the medical field, things like people that analyze medical images and write up reports, they're all going to go out of existence because tech can do that so much better. If you look at pathology, a friend of mine's a pathologist. He's been told within 18 months there'll be no jobs for him anymore in pathology, even though he's highly skilled, because tech does that better. So what we need to do is think, okay, well, what are the things that tech does better? And how do I blend that with the human skills of storytelling, of real empathy and emotional connection, of navigating politics, of helping people gain that consensus we talked about, help them build the business case, help them identify and manage their risks, the truly human ability to be truly creative and think out of the box and navigate all of the politics and do the negotiation. We need to focus on where there's complexity and risk, and that's where there's a role for humans. And then think, how do I use technology to basically be my assistant? I think the future is going to be, virtual digital assistants that run our calendar. They listen into meetings. They just do speech to text. Basically, as a stenographer, they capture all of our meeting notes. They put it in a CRM system. They recommend next best actions. They'll tell us, hey, this deal in the forecast has gone really quiet. What all of the analysis says is there's no communication in the next week. The probability of nothing ever happening here is going up dramatically. You need to give them a call. So it'll almost be managing and coaching the humans in what they do.
So I had an interesting conversation probably about a month ago with a management consultant down in Cape Town, Anne Hartzleff, in one of the previous videos. And she's saying, there's an abundance of clever and smart people in the world. And data and AI is going to start replacing that portion of, well, data is freely available now. So instead of having an abundance of smart people, we need to have people with wisdom and as to how to use the data that we're actually getting. And to your point of saying, how do we manage that risk? How do we understand from a client's perspective, the needs, the wants, and particularly the risk aspect to be able to create as much value as possible. Tony, I want to take you back and I want to challenge you a little bit, if you don't mind. Last question for the day. So RSCP talks really around the strategy, understanding the strategy of customers. And then you talk in other articles around recruitment of salespeople and making sure that you've got the person is a strong cultural fit. So strategy and culture, in your opinion, which comes first and which is most important, strategy or culture?
Well, it's someone else that said this, but that this thing of culture eats strategy for breakfast is dead true. Most businesses' strategies are way too complex, so we need strategies that we can execute. So a simple strategy is often the best one, right? Is actually often the best one. So we need to think about how we construct our business model to play to our strengths. And when it comes to culture in a business, culture is really just the behavior of the leaders, and any behavior that we ignore is actually a behavior that we build into our business. So in my view, we want a customer-centric culture. We want to absolutely value diversity, not just for the good altruistic reasons of valuing diversity and difference, but we don't want to have any blind sides in our business. The people we're selling to people in a diverse world as well. So I would just say, make sure that you're crystal clear about your purpose, mission, and vision. And then you're crystal clear about the values, the behaviors that you expect people to live within your business, because that in essence is the culture. And make sure that those things are aligned, because if they're misaligned, it's easy to lose your momentum.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So coming back to Tech Powered Sales, it's on pre-order at the moment. Obviously, all your major outlets, Amazon, it's HarperCollins, the publishers, correct? When is it actually launched? What is the launch date that it can be? Obviously, it's on pre-order at the moment, but when is it going full to market?
Yeah, so you can see Tech Powered Sales in the background here. Tech Powered Sales is published by HarperCollins New York and the American Management Association on the 29th of June 2021. And it'll be available all over the world in audiobook, ebook, and through all good bookshops.
Has anybody mentioned anything about the Terminator with that picture in the background? Is that your new moniker?
No, well, we all need that. We all need to have a little cyborg in us, right? Is the reality. So we've got to work out, rather than the Terminator, we need to be more like Iron Man. The interesting thing is when people think about the future and technology, they either adopt a dystopian view. They think about things like Prometheus and Terminator, or they'll have a utopian view. Things like Star Wars and Star Trek that's all bright and shiny and all wonderful. The truth is, AI could be mankind's last great invention, or it really could help us manage our precious biosphere and be far more sustainable and actually have a better world. But I think the notion that tech would just create more jobs than it takes away is actually not true. I think many roles are just going to disappear. And we can't all work in cafes and tourism. But, you know, if you look at there's not one profession that is not impacted by what's going on in AI, whether it's medicine, law, aviation, selling. All of these professions are dramatically impacted. So for all of us in sales and business, we just need to keep thinking, I have to provide the value that funds my role and value that's defined by the customer rather than me. And then how do I augment myself like Iron Man or Iron Woman and actually become superhuman?
Awesome. Well, Tony, listen, it's been absolutely fantastic catching up with you again and seeing you, well, not in person, but over technology. All the best for the launch of the new book. And thank you once again for taking the time. I really do appreciate it. Some great insights and all the best for the launch of the book and for the rest of 2021.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And it's been really good to talk to all my friends in South Africa and other friends around the world. Thanks.
Absolutely. I'll forward it to them. All right. Take care. Thanks, Cheers.